I could find information about you online and it's all professional information, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in a suburb of Chicago, about 45 minutes northwest of the city. Blue collar, working class. My dad took the train in every day. He was an ad man. He sold spots and dots for advertising clients, worked at Gray Advertising for a period of time. My mom was a school nurse. Grew up actually very fortunate. My mom grew up in Southern California, and my father grew up in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. But they met when my mom dropped out of school. She became a ski bum in Aspen, and my parents met in Colorado. And my father spent a bunch of time in Hawaii after college as a tour escort. And a good chunk of a good portion of my family lives in Hawaii today. And as a kid growing up, we would spend a few weeks a year away from the cold Chicago winters in Hawaii. And that's where I first surfed for the very first time. Oh, okay. And spent time going back and forth for till I was out of college. So almost 15 years, probably going back and forth for every few weeks a year. I went to college in Tucson, Arizona, at the University of Arizona, and studied computer science and business there. I've always been infatuated with technology and the opportunity at that time to build websites and consumer experiences was kind of top of mind at that time. There were a lot of websites that I was building in college and as a part of trying to put my way through school.
What kind of websites? What were you involved in?
Everything from local small businesses, at that time in 98, every plumber, electrician, small business, needed some level of contact with their customers. And so I had built a portfolio of websites for job recruiters as well. And it was that portfolio. One day, a company called Sapient came to campus and said, "We'd really like to hire you as an information architect." And I had no idea what that was. It sounded really cool. And Sapient at the time was one of those early consulting companies that were building many of the leading websites for big Fortune 500 companies, everything from Walmart to AT&T and Verizon, Sprint, and small startups at that time like wine.com. And so that was my first experience. I didn't spend any time in technology, really. It was all in user experience and design, working for those companies. And it was what Sapient allowed me to kind of travel as a consultant. My first job was in San Francisco, but it brought me to a long stint of work in Dallas, Texas, in Boston, Massachusetts, where I eventually moved, Atlanta, Georgia, and then brought me back to California, to San Diego, California.
Gotcha. Do you remember your first awareness of Surfline?
It would have been when I moved to back to Southern California. I love surfing, but I've had an on and off relationship with surf. I had an opportunity to surf on the East Coast when I was in Boston and Newport, Rhode Island. My college roommate was living with me at the time from San Juan Capistrano, and he would take any chance that he could to go to Newport, Rhode Island, to go surf from Boston. So we'd spend summers there. And when I moved back down to San Diego, kind of a premium subscriber at that point of Surfline. And there was a good period of time as I moved up the coast, moved from San Diego to Los Angeles, or Manhattan Beach at the time, that I was probably surfing the most that I had surfed in my entire life. I lived on Gull Street right above El Porto in Manhattan Beach. And That was the time I met my wife. I was probably in the best shape of my life because I was surfing 5 or 6 days a week. Those days are long gone.
Yeah.
And then moved my way up. Had started working for Yahoo and started to move up the coast towards Santa Monica and Venice before moving to the northeast of Los Angeles, where it might as well have been Siberia to get to the nearest wave from that point in time.
I'm curious, when you were a premium subscriber at that time of Surfline, considering your professional background, what was your interpretation of the user experience on Surfline? Where were there gaps and opportunities that they weren't seizing?
Yeah, I think, for me, the thing about Surfline over the past 2 decades, the design aesthetic has evolved very little, over that period of time. So most of my feedback was, user experience, and I had done that from Sapient, my work there. So I was very focused on, how to improve the user experience, the navigation, and always had wanted the opportunity to work for a company where they touted being able to go surf, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and be part of that. But for me, it was always about the cameras, and that was what I really used Surfline for, was about waking up. In San Diego, I lived at Mission Beach and would go north and want to check the cams before I got in the car to drive up. And so that was really it. I didn't really start using the forecast or kind of thinking about longer term planning, because at that point in my life, it was, it was kind of like, what day I'm going to play hooky today, or I'm going to decide this is it. And that was it. I was living, kind of day to day, versus today, we have a lot more demands on our time. And so different parts of the service today, make sense for me versus then.
Yeah. Regarding your career trajectory in Surfline, how did you view this role as an opportunity for you how was this job presented to you? Did you seek them out? And obviously you've worked for Disney, you've worked for Amazon, and why did you see this as a valuable opportunity in your career trajectory?
So I think as a brand, and I looked back to that time when this idea of Surfline existed. It's a Huntington Beach-based company that was right in the middle of or at the nexus of what was happening in surf at the time, and felt like the idea of working there would be an amazing one. And while I was at Yahoo Sports, and at Yahoo, running Yahoo Sports at the time, we acquired a small startup that was called Citizen Sports. It was a fantasy sports game that was on Facebook, and building a very large social audience. And the founder and CEO of that company was a guy named Mike Kearns. Mike Kearns is the principal and co-founder of the Churning Group, with Peter Chernin and Jesse Jacobs, who invested in Surfline. And they had been wanting to invest in Surfline. Their thesis is one where you bring passion together. They're looking for companies that connect with people's passions, and content and commerce together in a meaningful way. And I was introduced to Jeff Berg through Mike and the Churning Group on March 13th of last year, the day that really Orange County shut down from a COVID perspective.
Yeah. And
it was a casual introduction. And Jeff and I started a conversation that lasted 6 months between when I first met him and when he decided that the company was ready for a change, and the opportunity to bring in some new funding came about in December of last year. So during that period of time, that conversation with Jeff, I realized that all of the perceptions about Surfline outside or externally, that this was largely a group of people who were, you didn't see the site evolve very long. So my perception was that this was a group of people who were really weren't focused on building a new product for surfers. And what I found out was I couldn't have been more wrong about the people. It really came down to the focus of what the team was trying to attempt to do with the resources they had, and they were spread very thin. But the vision for where the company was headed and what Jeff and the team wanted to do was really clear. And so that, coupled with the strategy or the vision for the company, coupled with a group of people at the training group that I knew well, and as a first-time CEO, felt like I would be supported, that this was the next challenge that I wanted to take under my from a career perspective. So much of what running or building a company is about our core values, the people, and being a big part of a 3 million person company at Amazon or 170,000 person company at Disney. You just don't have the opportunity to impact those types of aspects of a company like you do when we're 100 people today, and the ability to kind of jump in and make that change or foster it in a way that makes sense.
What was the core business when you came on?
Core business has been always about forecasts, forecasters, forecast model, and cameras. That really makes up the really distinct product that very few can offer the core customers that exist today. And everything from that really allows you to better personalize the experience for customers moving forward. The 35-year data set of surf. There are millions of observations from human forecasters. So ideally, in a world, you could make a recommendation to someone about where they should go surf at any given time in the world based on that information. And that's the core business that we're focused on today, investing in and ensuring that it's rock solid.
I guess my question, there's probably a bunch of questions in this, but I'll share the thought. How do you grow that? I mean, a $30 million investment for the core business is basically isolated. It's limited to the coastlines, right? And really to core surfers are the ones who are going to want a detailed forecast. So how do you grow the business to the kind of degree that you would need to justify the $30 million investment?
Yeah, we think that there are really interesting adjacencies to what we've produced today. And those really come down to three pillars that we talk about a lot. Travel, the ability, again, to make recommendations about where customers can go to surf, whether in their local region or on a trip somewhere else. Training, progression is a really important part of surfing. And with a product like Surfline Sessions, which was launched last year, we have a unique ability to capture people's sessions and then begin to add training capabilities to that, as well as the gear, right? We know the types of breaks you surf. We know the boards that are in your quiver. We can make recommendations about fin setups, wetsuits, and doing something more personalized for folks based on those areas. So that's where we see growth to our core subscribers, but it's all about making that subscription more valuable.
How do you maintain kind of the core culture of the business while capitalizing on new growth opportunities? This is something that is inherent. It's a problem for all surf companies, whether it's a forecasting site, a clothing brand, a surfboard brand. As soon as they start trying to capitalize on growth, if it's a clothing brand, as soon as they're nationally distributed and sold in middle America, the coastlines don't want them anymore. And, I've certainly heard that criticism from podcast listeners where they want the cameras for themselves. They don't want anyone else looking at the cameras and coming to surf the beach that they're going to go surf. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
how do you, again, the original question is just how do you kind of maintain the core culture of the business while capitalizing on new growth opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have to. It's a delicate balance. I think part of the reason why I wanted to speak to you and to your listeners was, we were we made a couple mistakes with the La Bamba swell a couple weeks ago, and one of those things was that we decided that we were going to run an ad touting the swell as a part of that. We're spending more money on marketing the service, and we ultimately made a bad decision around using the swell to market the service. And in addition to that, we also sensationalized some of our headlines. While I think the conversation that was had on the show before was we were accurate in the forecast, but what we weren't, we were more sensationalized from a headlines perspective than we had been from a content in the past. And so we heard that feedback from the community. We heard that feedback from the core, and those are things that we're going to not do moving forward in the future. So we believe that we've got to continue to look for feedback on that. Surfline doesn't cause crowds from our perspective. That's not what the challenge is. The challenge really comes down to ensuring ultimately that people can use the service to help them make the best of their time available, and in a given week be able to know before they go and hopefully score more waves. So it's a delicate balance that we'll continue to monitor kind of as we begin to grow and gather feedback.
I think that you can get into a really tough situation by doing that, to be honest, and even by apologizing, because there will always be trolls. There will always be people that complain. And
Sure.
if you're steadfast in kind of what you're doing in the business plan and all that, then people will rally around that. So I'm curious, you referenced La Bamba, that you made a couple of mistakes. Were those actually mistakes? And ultimately, did the marketing generate more new users than ones that you lost because people were upset? Because I would argue the core users who did complain after the fact got right back on Surfline the next day. I don't think they canceled their subscription. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's right. And I don't think we're going to change the what. I think we are going to be careful about the how. And that's the difference. We're going to continue to market the service. We're going to continue to invest in like product features. Today we launched live wins across 20 different spots, and now we have hardware where we're actually able to provide those real-time conditions for surfers as a part of it. That's a result of the investment that we've built. So we're going to keep building those features. We're going to be more careful in terms of how we talk about swells. We're going to be more careful in terms of how we market the service to customers from that perspective. But the what isn't really going to change. We've been naming swells for 15 years. Some of those swells, have been called lots of different things. Since I've come on board and joined in the last 6 months, we've had North Pacific Overdrive. We've had Super Swell Saturday. We've had Pipeline Valentine. All of those swell names, were moments in time that people reflect back to, particularly on social, and saw John go backdoor at Pipeline on that day, and can go on to social and see all the content that was created on that day, and has nothing to do with Surfline from that perspective. But it was something that marks that moment and allows us to reflect on that. So that's not going to change. Now, whether or not we we're going to be much more careful in naming a south swell into Southern California, and maybe not focus on something that Lou Diamond Phillips can be on a T-shirt, as the meme for moving forward. But the how it will evolve,
Sure.
the what won't change.
How accurate would you? I mean, if you had to give a percentage for how accurate surf forecasting is today, could you assign a percentage to it?
I don't think I could, but I know that that's what our focus is on. The majority of the feedback that we get from customers is, you said it was 4 to 6 and it was 2 to 3. I'm standing here on the beach and it's flat, and it's this, that, or the other thing. And so what we are focused on doing is making sure that the most important thing that we do is earn the trust of our customers by making and continuing to ensure that our forecasts, our forecasters, and the real-time conditions we get from our cameras are the most accurate in the business.
Yeah, the percentage is kind of the curious part, because even if it is the most accurate in the business, we still do get that feedback all the time. I have a listener email that kind of just says exactly what you said. And by the way, he said, I don't even care about the La Bamba Swell branding. I just really want to talk about the quality of the forecast. And that should be the number one priority for the business. He said, for him, it's about 80% accurate. And that, often it'll say 2 to 3 feet or 3 to 4 feet, and he'll go and it's 1 to 2 feet. But he said that he's able to take information from other websites and then triangulate to kind of figure out what his local beach is going to be like. And so, is there a way? I guess science would have to improve for forecasting to improve,
and that's we're hiring more data science leaders to continue to refine that science. And cameras today are largely used for someone to visually check those conditions.
Yeah.
Through computer vision and machine learning, we will be able to update our forecasts with those live conditions based on those cameras to ensure that 80% at that spot that user is seeing, continues to increase over time, and become more and more, so that he or she doesn't have to go to multiple sites to triangulate that information. He should be able to, as a premium subscriber, get the best information possible in one place.
Gotcha. You talked when I talked about growth opportunities for the business, you talked about just making the premium user experience a little bit more robust for current surfers. Is there any plans to kind of appeal to the non-surfer, or to gain users and or even just people spending time on the site who will never end up going surfing?
There are features that we've been talking about that could improve the experience for non-surfers. One of the interesting things, again, from a computer vision perspective, is with these 750 cameras around the world, there's a great wave breaking somewhere at any given time. And yet you have to tune into that, or we have to package together cam rewinds of those moments. And so through computer vision, we'll be able to assemble a set of smart highlights that people will be able to tune in and watch as entertainment, versus using it to try and score more waves. So there'll be small features like that, but those are really for the core first. And if we believe that it can extend to other areas, that will be something that I think is interesting and would grow. One of the things that we're also doing from a media perspective is to create these live and real-time moments around surfing and celebrating great waves. So, for Pipeline Valentine, we in addition to our fixed positions, we also had commandeered a helicopter in order to capture what was happening at Pipeline during that period of time. And we want to create entertainment that celebrates that surf. There hasn't been great surf to watch from a live format perspective in some time. and now with WSL, having events, there's competition as a part of things that people can watch. But we hope the non-surfers and our core surf will watch the celebration of these live events and the real-time coverage that will go towards, again, kind of entertainment around surf that would exist as a part of the service, the free service that we would offer.
That's what I was thinking, or what I was presuming I would hear, was just based on the Chernin Group, there are other investments that they've made. That seems to be a commonality, or the ones that I follow anyways, Meat Eater, Hodinky, Barstool Sports. I don't think I even followed previously, but it's like those things have so many, that investment has allowed them to invest in content to where now there's so many tentacles out into the world that I can't avoid it, and it turns out that I found Meat Eater on Netflix a couple of years ago, and I liked it a lot. I just didn't care enough to actually go to their blog and to actually follow. So through that investment that they got, they were able to generate enough content to then make its way into my life to where now I can engage with it in a way that I probably always wanted to, but would never make the effort to do it. And so as it relates to surfing, I've often thought Surfline's kind of the best positioned brand to fill a lot of the gaps. The WSL is great at running surf contests, and they get out of that lane, and they've tried to get out of that lane in the last 5 years and do these other things. And they buy the Big Wave World Tour. They make a documentary about Billy Kemper. And it's kind of like some of it hits, some of it doesn't, but they'd be better almost just sticking in one lane because they can't be everything to everyone. And then you have all these individual bloggers, Jamie O'Brien, Ben Gravy, who are kind of creating this entertainment thing. But there's nobody that can give us news and updates to the minute better than Surfline could if they just kind of, number one, saw the need for it. And number two, had the resource to really plug all those things in, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we do. I mean, that is the aspiration. We have invested in these moments over the past 6 months to try and create that entertainment. We're still learning about what fits, what we're good at. We went down to Puerto Escondido for La Bamba to do a live event, and we had to vamp really for a couple hours because the waves, people weren't riding waves from that perspective. So there is some fine tuning that we need to do, but we feel like that celebration is something that we can do really well and do it in a way where, with the investment that we have, to ensure that we've got great writers, great videographers, great production teams doing that to try and create that entertainment. So we're in the first few innings here, if you will, around what we're going to try and do in that space. But Dave Gilovich has taken over the content team, and so Dave and Marcus Sanders and the team are now very focused on creating great content around swells and around these moments from an entertainment perspective. In the past, the company has had to really focus on supporting advertisers and really doing branded content. And with the investment now, it actually takes a lot of pressure off to be able to maybe move away from ad-supported content creation in some ways, and be focused on establishing that voice and tone that we think is uniquely Surfline, to your point.
There's tremendous opportunity it's kind of just however you guys want to architect it, but you could do it a million different ways. So I'm really curious to see how it all comes together. Can you say what percentage of the business was ad revenue when you got on versus subscription revenue?
I won't give you an exact percentage, but it was a small portion of the overall business.
Ad revenue
ad revenue was. Yep. The largest portion of the business is really in subscription. And that's the most important part. At the same time, as we develop that unique voice, there will be opportunities for sponsors, but it'll be very much in concert with one another, trying to find the right fit for what we want to talk about, and align that with a sponsor in the future, versus just distributing other people's content.
Maybe it's not perfectly analogous. Those other examples I gave of investments that TCG has made with Meat Eater, with all of them, you have a figurehead who's kind of out there connecting with me, the user. So you have Steve Ranella for Meat Eater, you have Dave Portnoy for Barstool, and even Hodinky, the founder, is pretty active, and there's a couple of other figureheads. Surfline doesn't have that. Do you think that matters, and do they need one?
I don't think it matters, and I don't think we need one. I do think that in surf, in particular, that athletes are an important part of content creation and telling stories, and finding those athletes, finding those surfers to help tell those stories is really important. And I think you'll continue to see us grow in terms of our relationships, to help those individuals tell stories, and to travel and to go places together, that I think that today it's more difficult to do with the brands, and the fewer riders that are on teams today. From that perspective, we'll look to fund those opportunities.
You mentioned Dave Gilovich and Marcus Sanders. They've both been with Surfline for a very long time. Do you know how long Gilovich has been there?
24 years. He just celebrated.
Who's responsible? Like, I guess, what does the board look like, and who's responsible for making kind of decisions about culture within the company?
Yeah, I think Dave has always been a great touchstone for us in terms of being that cultural input to the process. Also, Ben Freeston, who founded Magic Seaweed, is the head of product now at Surfline as well. And so Ben brings another tremendous point of view. And Jeff Berg and the rest of the team, like Kevin Wallace, who's been forecasting, are all great inputs to the process, and ensuring that we don't get too far astray from what the core values of the company are and where we're headed.
Do you have any I'm curious, Dave obviously knew Sean Collins. How much of Sean's DNA is still in the business, or how much of what his original objective was is part of the company ethos, or a touchstone for kind of your guys' decision making?
Yeah, a good portion of the forecasters worked with Sean, Dave, and Jeff. Worked closely with Sean. I think we just read a 1999 Surfer Magazine article where Sean was one of the top 25 most influential in surf. And when he set out to create Surfline, he was getting to the same point that I think many of us are, which was he had more and more pull on his time. And the whole reason Surfline existed for him was to help him score more waves, and to do it more efficiently than ever in terms of planning to go score those waves. And so we continue to stay very close to, I think, the original purpose for the company, in terms of what we're trying to deliver to customers. And who's to say how he would feel today? But I think we're doing and surrounded by the right people to make sure that that initial vision continues to live on.
Yeah. I'm always glad to see that those guys are all still intact. And also, it's just such a ripe opportunity for growth. I'm glad to see them, participating it and learning from it. I'm sure, because they've been focused on the brand, on their job for so long. You can kind of get myopic in your focus. So it's great to get fresh blood and educated blood, people coming in who have actually probably never even worked in surf, but are professionals, you know, at doing a task, and they come in and it can be, I think, really good for everybody.
And that's been the focus, I think, has helped everyone across the organization to align everybody on a couple of key objectives versus trying to do everything. I think that has definitely helped. And, you know, Dave will tell you, and I encourage him to come on. Dave will tell you that, you know, he's invigorated and is working as hard as he ever has at this time. He's excited about what we're doing. And yeah, is not afraid to say like, okay, well, maybe we're pushing this a tad too far. So there's a healthy balance here, I think, between some new blood and the people who have really made Surfline successful for the decades that have existed, the company's existed.
I asked you what the core business was when you signed on. What do you think the core business will be in 5 years from now?
Well, I don't think that this idea of our finite resource time growing at all. So I do believe that, you know, 5 years from now, I think that in addition to surf, there's been investments in the past at Surfline around boating and fishing and marine. And this idea of ocean enthusiasts, right? It goes beyond surfing in terms of foiling and kiting and boating and fishing. And I think that this idea of being able to make the call and choose what day you're going to go out and connect with your passion is going to apply to a couple other verticals in the future. So we already have that kind of with fish track and buoy weather today, have a strong opportunity, magic seaweed as well. So I think that 5 years from now, you'll see us apply this approach to other categories better. Not to say that they haven't done it in the past, but it's bringing this focus and a playbook to making sure that those customers on those products are getting as much investment and as much joy out of the products that we're creating for surfers today.
Yeah. How long do you envision staying at Surfline?
Well, I'll tell you. So, you know, anytime you come in as a new CEO, and you know, with investors, there's a certain expectation. What's great about the Churning Group has been there's no pressure and no expectations in terms of timeline. And what I've found being here for the last 6 months is that there's no better place in my mind to work right now. I'm having so much fun. I think the team is having a lot of fun. You know, we've made decisions, you know, in terms of making their lives better, increasing salaries, you know, making sure 401ks are funded, and then being able to allow people to work from anywhere, which is, you know, living the true surf nomadic lifestyle where you could live wherever you want, whether it's in Australia or Southern England, if you like the cold water, or if you wanted to live in California or New Jersey or New York, you can do that here at Surfline. And I haven't been at a company yet where I've been able to really truly integrate my work and my life in a way that feels sustainable and natural. So I'd be happy to be here forever, and to see the company grow over that period of time, and hopefully, you know, make more surfers happy with the products that we're offering than they are today.
CEO is a different role, obviously, than, I mean, based on LinkedIn, it seemed like you were working. What type of product was it that you had just come out?
So it was Alexa gadgets. So it was all the accessories
Gadgets.
for
Right.
Alexa, and all the additional experiences that you could create if you could connect into cloud computing.
Right.
I've spent a good portion of the last few jobs as a general manager, you know,
Okay.
spent time, you know, with deep technical background, user experience, leading marketing teams. And so this was just a culmination of that experience that gives me the opportunity to really focus on, you know, growing the company. I didn't realize truly how much context switching there is. Being a CEO versus being a general manager of a big company, of a group within a big company. So we'll go talking about office space, kind of on in one meeting, 401k match in another meeting, and then what are we going to do from for live wins and the launch of live wins coming up. So it's fun. It's a lot of context switching.
What my curiosity is, you're obviously an ambitious person and you have moved, changed companies fairly regularly. So I know you said TCG isn't setting a timeline for whatever the goals are, but let's say you hit all the goals, you exceed expectations. In 5 years from now, that would put you in a powerful position to have done that as the CEO, a first-time CEO, and execute whatever the growth goals are. What would your ambition be? I can't imagine that you would. I have a feeling that you enjoy growth, and so I can't imagine that you would be happy just. And I know the lifestyle is great, like you said at Surfline, but what would your ambition be in 5 years if you hit all those growth goals?
So one of the things that, while I almost spent almost a decade at Disney, and prior to Yahoo, I spent almost 4 years there as well. But the commonality between those two jobs was that I worked for the same person for 10 years, 4 years at Yahoo, and then a good portion of time at Disney as a part of that. And what I love about this job and my ambition is that as long as I'm working with great people, as long as those, I could be building O-rings for all that I care. But having people, my life is my job, right? Like we work constantly as a part of that, as a part of these jobs. And so I really want to work with great people. As long as there are great people here and we're continuing to grow, I could be here for forever. That's my ambition. A lot has changed, obviously, in the last couple of years. I have an 18-month-old daughter who I want to see, surfing, and I want to see grow up and want her to be a part of all of that as well. And so I think you can, in this situation, you can have success and, be available for family in a way that, that may not present itself with other opportunities from that perspective. So that balance is really important.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of balance, what does your workday look like? I mean, how many hours a day are you putting in? And I mean, you talked about this opportunity would allow you to surf more. Have you been surfing more, basically?
No, the answer is a hard no on am I surfing more. That is absolutely the one goal that I have not been able to really truly embrace. We are a global business in that sense. So, mornings start at 7 o'clock with, phone calls with Ben and the product team, which is in the UK right now, and ends at the end of the day around 5 o'clock, from a few calls with Australia in the afternoon. And then I try to spend 3 hours with my wife and the baby. And then I'll do email, while we're watching Netflix or, the latest Mikey February, video
Sonic
or something else that we're trying to catch about. Yeah. From that perspective. So it feels like, it's a pretty big commitment, but I find myself not tired as a result of that. And also I should say, guys like Marcus and our social team are working, weekends, which I mean are there's no swells and Mother Nature don't stop. So we're still covering things on the weekend. And so that's been something that's happened, but we can now ensure that we've got shifts and making sure that people can, take days off and things like that, that I think for the rest of the organization too is really helpful for folks.
How much other surf media do you follow?
This is the thing that I think, since I started, I'm a voracious consumer of content right now. Like I am consuming so much surf content because I'm not surfing, I am consuming a lot of content. And there is a ton of it out there, and there are making it right now. So, oops,
Lost
sorry.
your mic. Yeah, it's all right. I'm going to tell my dog to be quiet in the meantime. Sophia, can you give me a
But
check?
now,
Yes.
check.
Yes, yes. You're back.
Okay, good. Sorry about that.
You're the tech guy. Come on.
I know. My batteries are all dead.
Oh, is that what the problem was?
Okay, sorry about that. Take two.
No, it's okay. It's okay. Take two on content, voracious content, consumer. I can edit it. I'll splice it together
I'm
too.
watching a lot of stuff.
I'll splice it together so you don't have to like start at the very beginning, but just continue your thought.
I've been a voracious consumer of surf content. I think for a lot of different reasons. One, for me, I've found that staying relevant and ensuring I understand all the stuff that's going on across the industry is really important. And there's a lot of inspirational stuff out there that again, I'll use Mikey February as a great example. Like, it's just awesome storytelling. I look at what John did with Vela. I loved that, those 4 episodes. I couldn't wait for the last episode to come in. So that kind of storytelling is really something that has I think motivated me and the team to try and rethink how we tackle some of the storytelling as well. And then, there's just so much on Instagram that I'm trying to keep up with and follow and understand what's noise and stuff that I really enjoy. It's
such a double-edged sword in that, like, you explained your day, and it sounds pretty similar to my day, to be honest. It's like I'm at least on the computer working by 7, and I'm on the computer and working until 9 o'clock on the sofa with Netflix on, and I'll get little windows of the day, an hour here or there, where I'm not necessarily doing something active. But the big rocks of the day, recording a podcast, actually sitting in a meeting, all of that, then everything else is the sand that fills in between the big rocks in the vase is social media. It's like when I'm not in those big things, I've got my phone up just so I could stay current with whatever the new thing is. And I hate it, but it's so effective at delivering the information that I'm now dependent upon it. So I won't, go look at, no offense, but I won't go to Surfline to look at when John's new edit is dropping. I'll just wait until he tells me about it on social media, and then I'll go look at it. And, but that double edge of that sword is like, there is so much white noise on there that I probably spend 90% of the time just trying to scroll past things as quick as possible to get the 10% of updates that actually are surf news and that actually inform, my podcast work or whatever else. So
there's a ton of that. And too, I'll be honest, also, it does zap your day. And, again, I'm overly sensitive to having the phone all the time because my daughter is like on it. And when, I have that time between 5 and 8, if she sees me on that phone, she knows that she's not getting my attention. And, it's really changed my behavior for that period of time. But it's also hypercharged those other kind of white space opportunities where I'm like, I gotta make sure that I follow it all up. There's going to have to be some sort of breaking point here in terms of curation and being able to try and sift through that to make it more effective. I don't know what the answer to that is yet. There's too much of it on Instagram to be curated at this point, and that's a platform that we don't have any say in or control of, and that's just the reality of where people are producing content.
That's true, but it does inform decisions that you can make for Surfline. Like you were saying, kind of Surfline generated content that has value and isn't adding to the white noise by just reposting whatever everybody else is reposting, stuff like that.
And that's where we've been really focused on the science piece of, where the heritage of the company is and the forecast stories and the places and the people versus, republishing other people's content from that perspective.
In regard to being respectful of your time, I have 2 final questions. Number 1, who's your pick? Who's your pick for the world title this year? Give me a men's pick and a women's pick. Just to prove how closely you are or not following.
No. Listen, I think that I'd love to see Idolo win, and Stephanie Gilmore. I think would be my 2 picks on the world championship side of things. I'm excited about the lowers being here at lowers, which will be great, and I'm really looking forward to the moment where we can see surf here in the States. Awesome.
What was the last surfboard you rode? Final question for everybody.
Oh,
or whose boards
I'm
do you
riding
ride
right now. Well, there's 2 boards. So right now I'm on a mid-length smooth operator from Lost that I really like, and also the fun board that I like to ride is the twin fin from Maurice, actually down at Use Surf. I'm kind of a Use Surf. I'm always on looking for boards from Use Surf, and he shaped a 6.6 twin fin that I really enjoy riding. I'm 42 years old. I need all the foam I can get to catch waves these days.
Give shout out Maurice Agnello. Is it Edit Surfboards? Is that the name of the label?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, Use Surf. His name doesn't come up often enough, but Maurice is a great shaper. He's a great laminator. He actually sold his lamination factory to Lost Surfboards. So there's a chance that your smooth operator was actually laminated there too. But Maurice is a great shaper and a great guy. So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, thank you very much, Cal, for taking the time. I will, of course, in post-production, tell everybody to go subscribe with a premium subscription on Surfline if they don't have one already. I presume they do. Is there any final words?
Thank you, David. No, I really appreciate making time for us to come on. Really appreciate that. And listen, if there's anybody at Surfline you want to speak to, let me know, and hope to be back at some point in the future when it makes sense.
Awesome. Congratulations on the job too.
Thank you very much. And good luck with the next 5.5 months.
Thank you. We are so excited. We're so ready for this. So. All right.
It's going to be awesome. It'll change your life. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.